my name is Alanis, and I am a reporter for RPTV News. The Regent Park Social Development Plan, also known as the SDP, is a community-wide initiative aimed at fostering unity and togetherness among all the different residents and stakeholder groups in the community. The Social Development Plan is built around 4 areas of priorities of the SDP. Each priority area is represented by a different committee. The SDP committees are safety, communications, employment and economic development, and community building. In addition to the 4 committees, there is an SDP Planning Committee that meets weekly to help guide the activities of the SDP. The following report is of the January 17th, 2023 SDP Plan Committee meeting, held over Zoom from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. The first part of the meeting was facilitated by Daniella Costello, the City of Toronto Community Development Unit, and focused on the SDP appointment of a market resident to serve as a communication representative to the Community Benefits Committee. The second part of the meeting was facilitated by Adonis Huggins, a focus agency representative of the SDP Communications Table, and focused on unresolved issues related to January 12, 2023's SDP meeting and the City of Toronto's staff decision to allocate 2023 funding resources without prior consultation with the SDP. Let's go to the meeting.
Daniella, I just want to thank you for putting forward Amina's nomination from the Communications Working Group. I have been to the working group meetings, and I know Amina has been an active participant and has shown a lot of interest in CBOG. I do recall a conversation with yourself and Richard with regards to Amina's ask, because she reached out to me as the resident co-chair of the Community Benefits Oversight Working Group, just to make sure that there was no conflict of interest. I remember sharing the terms of reference related to the conflict of interest, but I'm hoping that conversation happened prior to this nomination. So I just want to make sure that was the case.
Yeah, so there were conversations that happened in November, and she talked with myself about the potential conflict, and we determined there was no conflict of interest. Adonis and then Dini.
Yeah, sorry, just to finish, if that's the case, then I strongly support us appointing Amina or as an SDP rep on CBOG. Thank you.
Hi, I have no problems in terms of the appointment. I guess the caveat is and that it goes to all members. I'm not trying to isolate her, but I think all members who are on the community benefits has to still be connected to the committees that they are involved with. So the only caveat is because I don't think she has actually come to a communications meeting, although members have met with her, that she makes an effort to come to the, if she's representing the communications, to come to the communications meetings.
Right, so in terms of like the 4 individuals who are on CBOG as SDP reps, they continue to be involved and engaged with the representation.
Yes.
For sure. Thank you, Adonis. And then I have a hand from Dini.
Well, I'm just kind of confused now. How did that name come forward if the person isn't involved in the group? So where did the name come from? How did this person come forward if they're not involved in the communications work group?
So I received the submission from Denise, I believe, from CS, sorry, as like one of the communications co-chairs. So what happened and what's happened like with the other working groups is that we had like that template where I just shared on the screen and people answered that question, and that's how that's one of the ways they showed interest. But at first they had to be selected from their working group to then come here where the decision would be made. So over the past couple of months, we've been in contact with communications seeking out a market rep, and this is the name that they had put forward. And had said that she met the requirement in terms of being able to represent the group at CBOG.
Okay, yeah, I just was wondering because it sounded kind of strange. How did that happen? Okay, cool.
Adonis?
Just to also clarify, I believe the chair met with her and explained what the communications table is all about, but she has not had a chance to attend the communications meeting itself. So there is a process from the communications perspective.
Great, thank you. And then I have Waleed next.
Yeah, in my opinion, Amina has met the expectations that was set by the planning committee, not just attending the communications working group, but submitting the appropriate document. And also there was a conversation with city staff regarding conflict of interest. So I really, think it's important to appoint folks who are interested in joining CBOG, but I do want to thank Adonis for that reminder that folks should be connected to the working groups. And I'm sure Denise and Ibrahim will be communicating that to Amina so that there's some report back to the working groups. So please, I'm just encouraging you folks to support this appointment. Thank you.
Next, we have Sarah Jane.
I'm wondering what the conflict of interest was.
So from what myself and Richard did was review the city's conflict of interest policy, as well as the flag raise, as Mina does work in government and industry relations. But in terms of her present role and even with past experiences, we didn't see her involvement in this process to jeopardize or to have any bias, as she doesn't have any present or past relations with the developers that are currently involved in the CBOG process.
Yeah, well, that would have been an important conflict. So thank you for clarifying that.
No problem. I'm not seeing any more present hands. So ahead of going into the nominating process, I just want to give another call out for any more comments or questions. All right, so then we'll just do a quick oral vote. So if you are in favor of nominating Amina, if you could just use the hands up reaction.
Sorry, Danielle, can everyone just raise their hand actually, not hands up? Because if they raise their hand, then the hand will stay and then we can count that. No, Dini, you did it right. Not actual hand, how you did it. Not the emotions or what are they, emojis, whatever they are. Not those, but keep your hand up.
Okay. Yes, keep the hand up. Yes, got it. Okay. Cool. So then we do have a majority vote. Myself, Richard, and Blaine as city staff, we do not partake in votes. Oh, as well as Lucky. Lucky's another city staff on the call. So then from the numbers, Mina will be appointed and I will be sharing the news and connecting her with the co-chairs, with our lead and Shane, so that she can get integrated into CBOG. Thank you, everyone. And then next up,
Sorry, can everyone just lower their hand, because Daniela will get ridiculous anxiety with all those hands up.
All good. So next I will share an RFP, which is a request for proposals, and that is from Ronnie at United Way. So presently, United Way, they're going through the SIF fund and they want to now evaluate the overall fund impact and learnings. So essentially they're looking for someone to lead this work who will review existing materials and reports, as well as engage with. Sorry, so this person will review existing materials, reports, as well as, provide an evaluation based on United Way's work. and this is open for just under a week. I believe that deadline is Tuesday or Wednesday. It's January 24th. But if you're interested, or if you know someone who might be of interest, please reach out to Ronnie Gorman from United Way. And I'll also share a link in the chat to that. And then next we have on the agenda.
Sorry, Daniella.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how much they're paying for this? Like, what's the compensation?
That is something that wasn't disclosed to me. But from the email I got from Ronnie, it was, if you have questions, to please reach out. It is too bad that, you have to get information about compensation. But I am hopeful that she'll have that information that she could share with you or with anyone who is interested in that. Also, I see a comment from Ishmael that the compensation is in the RFP. So perhaps when you actually go into the application, there will have more details about it. Next up, I see a hand up from Sugar, but I'm not sure if that's from earlier when we did the vote or if it's about this item. All right, so next up we have is a debrief from last week's meeting, which Adonis is going to lead. I will share that I do have a rosebud thorn exercise that we've used in the past when it comes to debrief certain things, but Adonis, if you feel like it's not appropriate to use this as a template, that's okay, but I will offer that if it's of interest. Sorry, you're on mute presently.
Sorry, I don't know what that rosebud is about, but maybe I could just start off by giving some context to it. For some members who aren't really familiar with the issue and wasn't able to come to last meeting. As you know, the City Council of Toronto authorized $500,000 yearly to support and resource the SDP. We had in the past, those decisions about who gets the funds were largely made within the SDP community, meaning that the SDP came up with a process to decide how those funds would be allocated. This year, we agreed on, after a review, there was internal review that was carried out by both the city and the SDP, and there was agreement on a final agreement on how that process would be carried out in terms of the review. Largely, the city wanted a process in which a small jury made up of community members would decide who would get funding for the SDP. And so that was the first time we did a process like this in terms of having a review panel for this grant. The other thing that we had argued about that we came mutually agreed upon was that the priorities of the SDP would be resource supported. So the priorities of the working committees would be supported. So the applicants, in order to qualify, that they had to submit grants that were aligned with the working group's priorities, each of the working group's priorities. So that's safety, communications, employment, and economic development, and community building. So that was a process that was agreed to. Mainly last meeting's discussion was that suddenly we found out that the process that the city allocated not only the 500,000 for the 2022 funding, but had allocated funds that were earmarked for 2023 as well. And the main thing, I guess, was in contention was that there was no consultation with the SDP, who had been meeting with the city for the past year. In that meeting, the city argued, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the city largely argued that they were in the middle of a process and that they felt they could not come to the SDP and consult with us around the decision to fund 2022 applicants with 2023 money. The other thing they had said that they talked about this and that this idea came from the review panel itself. That was the committee that was that the city facilitated to decide who would get funding. And their main concern was, again, that they felt because applicants from the SDP that were sitting in this table, that they couldn't consult with us because many of us had, or some of us had applications within the had applied for the 2022 funding. So out of that meeting, there were, both groups, I guess the city presented their arguments and the SDP presented their arguments. And there was no resolution to that. And really the resolution that I'm talking about is whether or not the city had a responsibility to consult with the SDP about using monies for 2023 that was allocated for the SDP. Again, the city felt that they had no responsibility to consult. So the question that leaves us, and there was a number of questions that came up, but the question that leaves us is that, or leaves me anyways, and I believe many of us at this table, is what responsibility does the city have to the SDP? Again, this was a year, we met for a year with the city. We came up with an agreed process in terms of how the 2022 funds would be allocated. Even though we had arguments, we had agreed on a process. Mm-hmm. And the city decided that for the reasons that they outlined, that they decided that they would make a decision without coming back to the SDP. I feel this was a clear violation of our agreement and our partnership. The city, and I'm talking the city funding unit, again, I'm not sure in terms of other staff feel about this, but as certainly the community funding unit felt that they didn't have to come to us. And the major thing that they claimed was a conflict of interest. Well, my argument for this is we weren't asking them to release the names of the applicants that they had allocated for the 2023. All they had to do was in the middle of the process was come back to us and said, hey, we have this idea. We want to expand the funding by allocating the 2023 funds so that more groups could get funding. No names had to be used. No groups had to be identified. It's the principle of consultation. It's a principle of partnership. They did not come to us about this. They decided on their own, and they decided to take their approvals to the city for that. And the reason why this is important is because what does a partnership mean? And that's really what came out of this meeting, was that either the city doesn't value us, value the SDP as partners. They don't feel that they need to come back to us and consult with us. That they can make unilateral decisions on their own about funding that was released to the SDP. So the question is this funding for the SDP? And if so, is it, shouldn't the city, shouldn't there be a responsibility on the city to consult with the SDP around how these funds are managed and used? Again, we had a year-long process for the 2022 funding that we agreed upon. So those are the contexts to the meeting. And I guess we need to figure out in terms of a couple of things. So a couple of things that have come up is the city certainly has a different idea of what conflict of interest is versus the SDP in terms of conflict of interest is. Because if they're saying that because groups are part of the SDP that are involved with the SDP, that we're all in a conflict of interest, and therefore we're giving up all our rights to be consulted. Secondly, it's really about the other issue that came up was more about the priorities. Again, is this SDP funding to support the priorities of the working group, or is this SDP funding to support the broader community that may or may not be doing social inclusion work or perceived to be social inclusion work? So those are the issues that come up, and we need to sort this out. We need to have a process of sorting this out. If we don't, these issues are going to repeat itself in 2004, 2005, and ongoing. So I'll leave it at that and invite questions about how we resolve some of these issues. So at this point, I'll just facilitate unless there's any questions for me. So I had Waleed, Abraham, and Inez. Waleed, did you want to start?
Thank you, Adonis. Thank you for facilitating this portion. I'm going to be very candid. I was so disappointed and the response from our city staff, specifically Jennifer and Oleg at our last planning committee. The response that I got was, yes, we could work on the evaluation piece, so access to that data, but we're in the midst of a process, a budget process, so that decision will be made by City Hall or will be made by council. So instead of working with us to basically take responsibility for not just the lack of communication, but for the broken promise, we actually worked together, especially in the end of the review process when we shared the findings of our internal review. And I think there was some sort of collaborative, work that we hope to actually reflect on. But the decision that they made unilaterally with members of the panel committee has created so much social disruptions in our community. It's actually worked against our goal of social cohesion and inclusion. It's not transparent. There's no accountability to the residents. And I'm deeply concerned by, the basically moving away from what this funding was for, which is to prioritize the working group's specific actions that residents wanted to take on, right? And removing that opportunity for residents to do that is not the co-creation, not the co-development, and not the scope of the SDP that was funded back in 2020. I did share an email with some of my colleagues from the RPNA and the Community Building Working Group related to the city's approval of the funding and what the expectations are. And one important expectation is that the stakeholders table must be part of that decision-making process. You cannot ignore the stakeholders table. That's why we have a community governance table that the city staff sit at, the T6C staff sit at. Remember that big conversation regarding the terms of reference for CBOG? Do you remember that? Not too long ago? It came back to the stakeholders table for information, but it was brought back to the planning committee. Those approvals that came through this body. And I think it's crucial that we respect that. Right? We respect the role that the community governance table plays. And what I'll just say lastly is I encourage members of the planning committee to depute. It's not too late. There's still going to be deputations. I think next week. I'm not sure if it's open to the public, but I can share that information via email. I know there's going to be meetings with our city councilor to discuss this issue, but I am really disappointed in what just happened and this precedent that we are hoping to stop from being a precedent. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you, Adonis, and so many other members of the planning committee for doing so much important work, such hard labor in the internal review process that led to the recommendations that we all approved and agreed to. So I'll leave it at that, Ibrahim.
Okay, Abraham, you're next. Go ahead, Abraham.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everybody. It's a whole new year. What I wanted to say is that the SDP network, there's different parts to it. One of them is the funding of the city funding that we get every year. What happened this year actually sets precedents for every year to come, not just from this funding with the city, but also other funders. What has happened is that the SDP has been removed from this funding that has been allocated. We used to have different ways of how we allocated funding through deep dive, the first year, the second year, and this third year is totally even way farther from the table. Right now, when I look at the list of folks that got funded, they are not attached to the network at all, some of them. Some of them are far removed. If planning table is to plan for the full table, how are you going to plan for folks that are not even sitting at the network? How collaboration is supposed to happen with these projects? All of these projects, we used to get them from every table. Every table used to know what the projects are. We used to understand what they're doing. We used to know there was so much transparency. And now under the guise of conflict of interest, everything is secretive. We don't know a single project that got approved, what they're all about. We don't know how it benefits our community. All of it is under secrecy. And if this funding is meant for the wider community, let it be said so. Let it say, this is no longer the SDP funding. This is a Regent Park funding, and everybody can focus on applying individually to do good work in the community. But why meet every week to plan for a network that is not even attached to each other? There is no cohesion, there is no inclusion, there is zero reason to get involved if everybody can apply from the city directly. So who are we representing? This planning table represents nobody because the table is disattached. So I say, moving forward, we don't need to bother our friendly staff. They're doing their job. We need to target this from above. We need to target this from city level when it comes to the bosses of Richard. We need to go back and say the funding is no longer belongs to us, and we need to go as a group. And what I'm suggesting is that because they do this at the end of the year and they bait us with the money. So when the money comes out, everybody is already grabbing it. Every organization is thankful that they received it. and then we do this cycle again. They're not going to talk to us until the next funding at the end, and here's a new surprise. So I say, let's get this city funding back to how the SDP intended it. Let it be a network funding. That's how I saw it before. If I'm wrong, that is not a network funding. It's a region park. Everybody can gather. Then there's no reason to have planning tables and all of this. So thank you very much.
Ines.
Okay, thank you. Ibrahim said a lot of the stuff, but my understanding of this grants deep dive was bad, the way it was. But this, with the city, the way they did it, that really struck me. That was like a stab in my back to this SDP in the community in Regent Park. Yes, they had their process and stuff, but not coming to the community regarding about making for 2023. Some of the people that asked for grants, who are they? I thought the SDP money was supposed to be for Regent Park. Oh, we need clarification from the city again of this, because any Joe Blow could come and request grants. You don't have to sit in the SDP, so anybody could just come. Because if that's the case, oh my gosh, then let me go and request grants too for myself and do things. Like who is this this other one of the black something, where was it? Sorry, I have it in my thing. For requesting grants for the black people or something. Who are they? I've never heard of them. So at the end of the day, I could ask a grant and just put any whatever mysterious name and just get a grant for it that I'm doing. Is it possible with the city if we could get the people who got grants? What is their criteria? Who is it for? What are they doing and stuff? Because I think we should have that at least for us to see what is it they're doing, who is it for. I think we're entitled for that. I'm sorry to the city. I know it's not Richard and Daniela, but it's higher up. But at the same time, it's so sad to see this, how things have been done, how it has been going. And a lot of people went to City Hall, and this is like a slap in the face. And Ibrahim said, like, so who are we at the end of the day? Why are we coming to meetings? Why are we talking about this when nobody really gives a damn of, like I said before, any Joe Blow could come and just request grants. And the hell with the people in Regent.
Thank
you. And I'm sorry for my comments.
Thank you, Inez. And just to, again, Dini will come next, but I guess that was another conversation that we had in the meeting around making the groups that received funding provide us with more information about their work plans, and the city is considering that. Dini. Sorry, Dini, you're on mute.
Hi. Yeah, one of the other things with the meeting we had, the last meeting we had, was there was no commitment made to continue to have conversation with us on these matters. I found that very distressful. And, you know, and the comment that was made, well, we just keep having the same conversation over and over again. You know, the reason for that is because the answers and the responses we're receiving are not satisfactory. So yes, we have to keep going back to the same point. One of the clear asks for me was around the need for us to co-develop a shared understanding with the city in regards to what collaboration means and what can be expected. Obviously we don't have the same understanding of what collaboration means. And I think we need to define that in clearly define that, agreed to by both parties, which is something that we can be held accountable to and something they can be held accountable to moving forward with this relationship. Because it's really not. And we have raised many times, we have brought documents forward, motions from city council, staff reports from city, and there seems to be no onus to have to be accountable to to what's said in those documents. It's like it can be just brushed aside. So I really think we need to continue this conversation with the city. It's not good enough just to say, well, you do have to talk to us. So I don't see this as that's the end. We need to get back to the table, call them back to the table, and call them to the table in a time where when they come to the table, they know that they're going to be there with us for X amount allotted time and not feel pressured that, well, they might have to leave or we will have to leave or we can't be here, we don't know it. That's not appropriate. You don't treat people like that, So we'll find a time, and if something comes up like it did, I understand that, we reschedule. That's okay. You have to reschedule. Things like that do happen. But not to come into a meeting and as meeting opens, tell people immediately that you don't have time for them. That's not cool. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Dini. I'm going to ask you to, when we get to the recommendations of how we move forward, I'm going to ask you to bring that piece back up again about continuing the discussions with the city at senior.
I want you to. Can you do me a favor?
I'll move to Daniella. Sorry, Ismail is next, and then Daniella.
Yeah. So from the meeting we've had with them, I think we already anticipated some of what they will say. I think they've clearly communicated in their email that the rationale, the reasons that they gave away the money is, one of them, administrative burdens, they said. So people, but I was curious, is it administrative burden for the people who are applying or for the city to be doing granting processes again and again? And then the other one was, what do you call? So they gave a few reasons. But anyway, I think in terms of our next steps, one I do think is we need to have conversations about, I think, 3 things. The first one was we need to have a shared understanding of what the funds are for, because I think we have 2 different ideas. They seem to think that the funds are for any activity that can relate to social development. So if I'm doing an event that brings people together, that's social development. Therefore, this money is for that. Where we think is the money is for the social development plan, and that has a process where the community is engaged, action priorities are identified, and projects are co-developed and collaborated and brought together by members of the social development plan to implement it. Not any action that's happening in the neighborhood. Is part of a specific plan with specific priorities, and that's how we understand the funding is required for that. Collaborative action identified through the social development plan and its work groups. So that's a first conversation, a shared understanding of the vision. And I believe the city documents support us as opposed to this idea of any action. The second one is, and I think this is important for us to figure out and to problem solve, is who we are in this process. because they point to a good point, which is we are both in charge of the process, but also are the recipient of the process, right? So if we were an organization and the city said, hey, SDP network, here is 2.5 million, do with it as you please, that would be straightforward. And then as an organization, we would decide what we do with 2.5 million. However, we're not an organization, we're a network. So we are meant to facilitate a process where the community is engaged, funds are put together, but we're also part of the process. Each of us are part of work groups, and those work groups are themselves applicants, right? So we're both in charge of the process, or we both want to be in charge of the process, and we're also an applicant in the process. And that's what they said about conflicts of interest. So we need to solve that puzzle, or else we're shooting ourselves in the foot and we're not listening when they speak as well. So that's the second part. And the third part is about power. And I'll be honest with you here. This is a question about, sometimes when I'm having a conversation with someone, the first thing I ask myself is, do we understand each other? And if we understood one another, it's okay if we disagree. And different people have different authorities. If you have the authority and you disagreed with me, I leave you to your authority. But if you're not even willing to understand me, or if I make good points, you're not willing to acknowledge those points, and based on your position of power, you avoid me, or you change the topic, or you say I don't want to have a meeting, then we have a problem. And I do think in this situation, when we do make good points with the city, sometimes because of their position of power, they don't acknowledge the good points we make. And my question is that we need to solve for is, how do you get someone who has power over you to get you to listen, or at least to understand you, or even technology? And that's why I think the question about the counselor, question around other forms of, and maybe it's about relationship building. Maybe because of our relationship is so ruined that they feel we're at risk. Maybe that's why they're not willing to acknowledge a good point we make, because they feel threatened. I don't know what it is, but I do feel like it's a question of power, and they're not really paying attention to the good points we make. So I think those are the three things that come to my mind. And if we're able to have conversations about those three things constructively, we can make some changes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ismail. Very thoughtful. Daniella.
Yes, I did want to first clarify in terms of conversations with CFU. Those remain open, and they are a possibility if that's what the group decides they want to proceed with. So what's been communicated from Jennifer and Oleg is that if the group wants to do another planning committee where they attend, that could be an option. If the group wants to do a smaller group having a discussion, that's an option. As well as if the group wants to submit a formal complaint, that's also an option. So although the conversation last week didn't end where everyone felt like it was resolved, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the final conversation, and they're not anticipating it will be either. So just want to clarify that conversation can and most likely will still take place once the group decides how they want to proceed in terms of their communication with the community funding unit. And then also to the point of groups who receive funding who aren't presently here in the SDP, I was hoping we could discuss to the questions that Inez raised, what it would look like if they were here, and what are the expectations for them in terms of what they're sharing, who's coming, how often they're coming, and just talking about what would inclusion look like into the SDP for someone new. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniella. Next I have Abraham. Sorry, Marlene, did you still want to speak? You haven't spoken yet. Your hands were up.
Ishmael really covered off what I was talking about.
Okay. Abraham, did you want to go again?
Yeah, thank you. For us, I think the actual point is that When we received the first year of funding, it was a funding to the network. The network received the money, and through our own process, we allocated that funding. It was new to us. It was tough, challenging. The second year also. So this idea of conflict is something new that is useful to the city to use it against us. When John was here with us, the funding went to the network and the network allocated. As each year, we are losing control of how this funding is allocated. More and more we're losing control. And that is because we are not straightforward. We are not telling the city this funding is for the network, and the funding and our own network will allocate that funding. We need to go back to the board with John. We need to go back to the board with our councillor. This is about power. And each year, the more they take us to the end of the year and allocate the funding, this 2.5 million is going to be gone. Then the lessons learned from this is going to be the network can allocate money of its own. Others need to allocate it for them. So this network needs to gain control of its funding. And I'm fearful that other resources and other funding will be duplicated like this. So I say the planning table needs to put together an advocacy members to advocate on behalf of the network to get this funding back to the SDP. And that will be communication, not with staff that already are telling us again and again, no, no, no. We need to go beyond that. If we hear no from John, then we need to go to our councillor. And Joel and his team needs to advocate residents to go to the city and depute this. Thank you.
Hello. I'll go to Miguel, and I think, and then unless there's anybody else. Okay, Miguel and then Michael, and then I'm hoping that we could wrap this up by having a discussion around some of the recommendations everybody made. So, okay. Miguel, go ahead.
So my recommendation, if I understood correctly, Daniela, is that we had the opportunity to raise a complaint. And I just put on the chat a link to the complaint link with the city social development, finance, and administration. And I put also down the name on the current director. Her name is Denise Andrea Campbell. You know, it is a time that it has come a time for her to know us, to see us, to talk to us, to understand our position. Because I know that the good people here, Richard, Daniela, are good people. But they have limited power, right? The paycheck is little compared to the paycheck of Denise Andrea Campbell. So she needs to come to this meeting and hear these complaints, because it is absurd what has happened. We don't need more turmoil. I told this to City Council, City Budget. We don't need this headache. It should have never happened. So we need to get the message straight to the big boss of the Social Development Office. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Miguel. Marlene, your hand's up again.
Yeah, it is. There's nothing new about the way we get treated. It's, you know, from the city. And every time we kind of pull ourselves up, you know, I feel that we're undermined, constantly undermined. We are well established now in Regent Park. You know, and I think they forget what the SDP is all about. You know, the SDP means a great deal here in Regent Park, and I don't think they want it to meet that much. You know, not just the city. You know, from my perspective, neither do they, you know, at TCHC. I think they'd like it to mean less. But it means a great deal to us in the way things are run and the way we make decisions. But every time we are really established and we are, you know, getting our own policies in place, we're hit by something else. And I think it's an attitude change that needs to happen about Regent Park. And that's not happening at the highest levels. And establishing ourselves and making sure that we're not going to stand for it any longer. This just goes on, decade after decade, and it's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. The way sometimes we're spoken to, the kind of brush off we get, that meetings are stopped midstream because they don't have time for us or don't have patience for us. Who do they think they are? The people at City Hall work for us. We do not work for them. They are hired by us. They are voted in for us. And they're there to listen to us and understand that this is a community of intelligent, capable, thoughtful people who can teach them a few things if they did not have the arrogance not to sit and listen. But some of it is just bloody arrogance. And we've seen it time and time again. And I'm sick of it. I am truly sick of it.
Okay, thanks, Marlene. I'm gonna take this part of the meeting to some resolutions before and then if people want more comments about that. I thought that
you already had me on the speakers list.
Oh, sorry, did I miss you, Michael? Oh, go ahead.
So I think we've been like needlessly excluded from some parts of this process. I mean, if money is given to an organization, then they bring all their board and their staff in to plan how that money will be used. They don't say you can't be involved in that decision because you have a conflict of interest. They want those people involved in making the decisions on how the money will be used. I mean, the conflict of interest part of it applied to the city decision to give the money. We didn't make that decision. There was no conflict of interest. City council made that decision independently of us. But once the money was given to the community, then, like any money that is given to any organization, they are then expected to plan how it gets used. So I don't think conflict of interest even applies at that stage. At that stage, the people who can plan how the money will be used are expected to be involved in those decisions. So I think we were needlessly excluded from the beginning. So I just want to make that point in addition to the other reasons I've given. I don't know that anything's going to change at this point, but I think that's still a valid point. In terms of Daniella's question about how the project should be involved with the SDP, well, I would say they should completely integrate themselves now into the SDP, and including the fact that the SDP working group members should be able to join their project planning decision-making groups, and that the projects simply become part of the SDP fully, so that SDP members can actually be part of the project decision-making groups and be part of running those projects. That would be my idea of how they should be connected to the SDP. And the last point I wanted to make is not so much about the city, but about what we can do in the future, which is we can reinstate the community deep dive process, even if it is not the final decision-making process and the city still goes ahead with its panel-based process, does not prevent us from still doing the community process first, so at least everybody knows where the community stands. Whether the city chooses to accept those results or not to me is even less important than simply the fact that the community did go through that process. So I don't think we even need the city's permission to do that, since I'm not asking for it to be a decision-making official process, but I think we should just do it anyways.
Well said.
Great. Waleed, is this, I'm trying to get to the resolutions now.
I'm going to put forward a resolution, Adonis.
Okay, so we had a few so far, just before you speak, Waleed. One was Ismail's point that we need to start thinking about 3 points that he said: a shared understanding of what the funds are. How do we resolve this process in which we are both recipients and want to play more of a role in decision making? And then the third point of it is how do we resolve these issues around what Ismail said, power, but really jurisdictions like and responsibilities. I also there was a comment I think Miguel had that we need to start taking these conversations to senior level city staff and go beyond the community funding unit and city staff. And then the third piece I heard I think was do everything we can to try to integrate all the funded projects into the SDP. Am I missing anything? Dini, go ahead.
Yeah, you're missing need to sit down and have a shared, co-develop a shared idea around what collaboration means and what it looks like and what we can expect from each of our partners.
Yeah. I sort of added that with Ismail's point of shared understanding, shared collaboration. Again, not with city staff, meaning the community funding unit. Again, we met for a year with them already, and we weren't able to do that despite the fact that we thought we did. So I feel that we need to bring it more to senior level. So we have other people. Richard, sorry, go ahead.
My point is I don't want to have a conversation. I want it documented. Yeah. I want to develop a document so that it's something that we can call back, not just a conversation. These conversations are not helping us. I've been in conversations since 2007.
Okay, I'm going to add that. So a document around the issues that we're looking for and around the...
Yeah, a collaboration agreement that we have. What is our partnership? I'd like to develop a document, the shared document, co-develop it with the city about what a collaboration looks like. What does it mean to both of us? What can we expect as partners in this collaboration? Because I'd like it to stand.
Okay, hopefully that would be the end point of these conversations. Agreed. Waleed, Richard, Ines, Joel. We're looking for recommendations that haven't been made or to support the recommendations that are, we're looking to move this process beyond just a beef session. Waleed, go ahead. Waleed, you're on. Waleed. Okay, passing past Waleed. I know he's there. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think to Dini's point, when we left the last piece, Ishmael brought up a few points, and I said that we need to put that in writing and bring it so that we can have what the SDP sees as collaboration, and then we can look at what STFA sees as collaboration or funding unit sees as collaboration. So I think we talked about that at the end of the last meeting. No, I don't think we did talk about that at last meeting. And then also myself and Daniella at the end of the last meeting committed that we would reach out to all the funded partners to make sure that they're connected to each working group and each table. So we can check that off. That's on myself and Daniella to go and reach out to all those working groups, suggest and make I would say somewhat of a firm suggestion that they attach themselves to the working groups. I think that would look like the co-leads of each working group sitting with the funded group to talk about some of their priorities, or as a whole group, whatever that looks like. To Dini's point in the last meeting as well around the evaluation process and how they're going to be evaluated, we are also looking at, and we talked about this, is bringing some, myself and Daniela coming to the working group meetings and talking about what are some of the targets or what are some of the things we're looking for or the impacts we're looking from projects, and having 4 or 5 indicators or impacts that they're looking for, because I think the cities, from a community development side of things, myself and Daniella are looking for some pieces so that when we write these reports, we have this data. I think, Adonis, I called you on some of those things around some of the focus stuff. So that I think that solves Dini's piece around the evaluations and the evaluations and the work plans. So I think we can check off 2 or 3 of those, and those are on myself and Daniella. And part of Daniella's job, a major part of Daniella's job, is making sure that those groups are connected to the working groups. As for, I think some people were saying that, some of these groups aren't necessarily connected. I think it's always good to have new people attend these meetings or new people come into these meetings. So I think it's for us to integrate them into the SDP and into, having a seat and having a voice at the table as they are in Regent Park. So I just want to I know we're going through, and then I think the collaboration piece, that I completely agree with Dini. I think it has to be in writing and it has to be understood. The other thing that I made a point of last meeting is that I think that the table also has to understand kind of where the city is coming from as well. And we have to kind of find a midpoint of that, because I hear what you guys are saying, that the city doesn't understand where you guys are coming from or where this table is coming from. But I also think there's the other side that the table needs to see where the city's coming from as well, and where they are. So looking for that middle ground, and I know it's not going to be easy to find, but I think writing it down and having a scripted piece that we could actually work on, and then find that middle ground in there. So I think 2 or 3 of those recommendations that were set forward, Adonis, I think are in motion, and I think there's 2 or 3 that need to be really looked at much deeper. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Ismail, we're getting back to resolutions?
Yeah, so I think in terms of some of the pieces, I know that connecting to the social development plan is important. And connecting to the social development plan can mean different things, but I think the basic one I'm referring to is joining a work group and attending those monthly meetings when you're able to. This is not attend every time. And share your project. What is it about? How does it connect to the priorities of the SDP? And for me, it's not about forcing that group to become a member of their group, to decide with them about their project. If the group is open, then it's open. But it's not about forcing, going into their project and saying, hey, I want to be part of your project and you have to accept me as part of your project because you're part of it. I think that's just too intrusive. I think if they're an open group, they're an open group. If they're a closed group, they're a closed group. But making sure that they attend the work groups, share their projects and how it connects to the priorities. I think that's the minimum level of connection I think I'd like to see. In terms of our next steps, I think the dialogue has to continue. And I agree with Dini that we have to get a written agreement, between ourselves in terms of what collaboration means. But I think those are conversations that need to happen. The question is whether, and one thing, and you might not like me for this, is when the city is sort of speaking to a lot of people, is different than when the city is speaking to our representation. Because sometimes they come to these meetings and what they see is they're speaking, sometimes it's an open-ended community meeting, right? And they're careful about what they say. We're recording the meetings. So what I'm trying to say is like Ibrahim talked about a group of us speaking about certain things, I think that's sometimes it's warranted, not all the time, but sometimes, especially when we need them to open up, especially when we need them to clarify why they took. Like, for instance, I asked her a question last time and I said, do you see any risk towards the decision you've made? And I was told no. So that means there was an unwillingness to recognize even risk. And I was even afraid to ask, if you were to go back, would you make the same decision? right? So all I'm saying is, and the third one is, and people might not like this, is because we have to stop, and this is difficult, pitting one project against the other. Like later on, we'll find out what one project is about. Like for instance, I didn't know what the project, Street Haven, that project is about. I don't know what the Birth Center project is about. I don't know what other projects are about, but I will get an opportunity to find that out once the right connections are made. And hopefully there'll be good projects because a panel of Regent Park residents said these were good projects. The question is not they're bad projects. The question is around accountability, transparency, and collaboration. It's not about why a particular project was not picked over another. If we go down that road, then we will tear each other's arms off. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. Ines.
Okay, thank you, Ishmael. You hit a lot of points there. So can we ask for requests for copies of whoever got grants? I mean, we used to get them before when it was the deep dive and stuff. Is that possible? So I think it's just important, even with to Richard's comment saying that we need to tell them, and Ishmael said it, I don't think we need to tell them if they want to come to the table. It's your own decision to come. Since you got SDP grant, come to the committees, because at the end of the day, they're going to have to be transparent in the stakeholders table to come in and show, or what have you been doing, or where is the money going towards and stuff, right? Because we're talking about transparency. You receive an amount of grant, you're going to have to come to the stakeholders table and present it to everybody. Because if you got money for to do all the that you got, it's we are working for the community, and you owe it to us to show us what are you doing and where's the money going to, right? And like, I don't want to say no more about the Birth Center and some other ones. I'm done. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ines. Again, I'm concerned that we're going to end this meeting without coming to a really strong conclusion on what we're going to do. So far I heard, just before we get to Joel, I heard that we need to work with agreement with senior staff around a shared document for collaboration and understanding of the funds are about what the process of how these funds are decided, and a third thing around accountability and figuring out understanding from the city's point of view what accountability is about for them and what accountability means to the community, to the SDP. That's what I heard so far, and everybody agrees that that the work plans should be shared with the SDP in order for projects to be evaluated, and that they should, wherever possible, to encourage all the groups to be involved with the SDP's working committees. That's where I am so far. Joel.
I would suggest, so I agree with all of those, that summary that you made, Adonis. I would suggest that the next step in that then for us is to prepare our summary of our, what we would like to see as the ideal state of what collaboration means. So we bring that to the city, and I think Richard was suggesting that maybe the city would bring their own document. I don't know. And furthermore, that we ground our ideas in the council decisions. So we're constantly referring back to that, because that's a common ground that we can work from. And then last idea is that I think maybe we could all say that, yes, the city comes where it comes from, but it seems to me we're probably doing something novel here. This is an innovation. That the way that the social development plan is being funded has never been done before in Toronto. maybe what we're seeing is that the way that the community funding unit has developed its processes, we're sort of going beyond what works for the glitches and the pain that we're finding. And maybe, so just to really get into the fundamental principles of what's going on here, so that, and we may find more common ground there than we might otherwise find, that just by saying to the city, you should do this, and the city says to us, you should do that. But maybe if we can dig down deeper, we can find something that might help us all to move forward together. And lastly, I'd suggest that this is a conversation that would make sense, I believe, for the councillor to be present, not as a way to sort of hold the SDFA's feet to the fire necessarily, but just to be part of that finding solutions kind of spirit.
Thanks, Joel. Waleed, I did come to you before, but you were on the phone or something. You missed me. So Waleed, and then Abraham, Michael.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Waleed.
Thank you, Adonis. I've been patiently waiting to express one point, which is our way ahead, is to invite Councillor Chris Moyes to the Planning Committee, where you can hear from all of you the concerns that we shared with city staff, and to secure a commitment from the councillor to have a conversation with the head of SDFA with regards to those concerns. Our councillor is our elected rep, but is our advocate, and should be super supportive of the social development plan, right? So I want to request that one of our action items is for the co-chairs of the social development plan, Greg, Marlene, and Ishmael, write to the councillor expressing the concerns that were shared at this planning committee, and to invite him to a future planning committee. And what I'm hoping we could do is prepare for that planning committee to articulate those concerns directly from the planning committee of the SDP, and allow our city councillor to do his job. Thank you.
Thanks, Waleed. Abraham, and then I'm going to try to bring this to a conclusion.
I say in the next planning table, we have to solve this one problem we have. The one problem we have is, are we a network, a body that receives funding from the city, or are we individual organizations or individuals, grassroots, that are going separately to the city? That has to be settled. If we are receiving funding as a network, then we need to really complain, because that is year one. That's what happened. Year one, we received funding as a network. Year two, similar. This is the year that all things are, we are treated as individuals. We are treated as grassroots, as in organizations, everybody on their own. So I say the main problem is this a network receiving funding, or is the neighborhood separate, everybody for its own? And to do that, if we are going to, we need to complain. We need to make use of that letter that Miguel showed us, and have a conversation with SDFA leadership, and say we need this funding back to how it was assigned to the first year and second year, and the network will decide how it spends that money.
Okay. I'll put that in part of the resolution. Now, Michael, go ahead.
So I just want to say that, like, with regard to the projects, it's more than just having them join the working groups. It was having the working groups join their projects. And I hope that point doesn't get lost, and they just simply be asked to attend working groups, and we're still separate from their projects.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to try to wrap this up as best as I can with everyone's a summary of everyone's thoughts. So again, I heard that as a collective that we have to develop some kind of document about what we are trying to achieve or how we see ourselves. That document should be grounded in city documents, to Joel's point, that there should be a small advocacy group, or the chairs, or works with a collaboration with the chairs and the advocacy group that brings forth or reviews this document and then comes to the planning committee with this document, but brings forth our concerns to senior staff, and that we try to involve our city councilor so that they are informed about what's going on. And as part of that document, we have to decide if this is a network or our individuals, or if we are individual recipients. And what we're working towards is a kind of a shared understanding of what the funds are about, and a shared understanding of what collaboration means between the city and us. We have to decide how do we, in terms of how do we address the city's concerns about conflict of interest, and meaning that how do we make decisions where we are both groups of who are involved with both applicants and recipients of funds. And that probably goes back to Abraham's point on whether this is a network or individuals. And then thirdly, in terms of a signed document that really outlines all these issues and has jurisdictions in terms of responsibilities and accountabilities, that really spells out between the city's responsibility and our responsibility as a network. I might have missed something, and I'll try to put this in point form to send, but is there anything that I might have missed on top of that?
Yes, I think what we need to prepare is timing. I think we always have a problem with time, and we always have a problem with how long is too long for these talks. If we ourselves can come into terms with this, what we want from the city, and we give the city these timing on these things, there has to be a timeline for us to say, we're not being heard, and we need to escalate this. And we need to actually go, and what are those escalations? What are those things that we need to do as residents of this community, as stakeholders of this community? And how do we get them really to hear us in terms of power-wise? Thank you.
Thanks, Abraham. I think we are going to the next level. Remember, we allowed the city funding unit to come in and have a discussion with us. We're unsatisfied with what they said. We're now bringing it up to one level more, to the senior level, and beginning those discussions with them.
Yes. We have to be careful. We have to be careful about timeline, right? We have to be careful. Just generally, what are these timelines that we are escalating?
Okay, I think that will be worked out with the chairs and this advocacy group that will be involved. But I sure hope that this is, I think it's super important. It's actually a priority because everything flows from this. Every evaluations flow from it. Everything flows from it. And we can't wait for the next round of funding to decide these issues. So for me, I feel it's a really important priority. So the next, we got a few minutes left. The chairs, is there anybody who wants to be part of this advocacy group in terms of working on the document and in terms of working with the chairs around the first stage? So I have names, which I'm going to write down. Dini.
I do.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Okay. I'll put up my hand.
Sarah?
Sarah Jane, yes, please.
Sarah?
Did you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, I got you, Michael.
Did you put me?
Ismail?
Ines.
I got Ines.
Yeah.
Okay,
And the 3
great.
chairs.
All right.
Sugar.
Who?
Sugar.
Sugar. Okay. So we have a fairly great big group. So I'll leave it. I'll work with if that's okay to work with the chairs around trying to get a separate meeting from the planning committee to take this to the next step.
How soon can we do that? Get a meeting set up?
Within the next, at least a meeting set up, can we sort of work towards the next week or two?
No, I think we need to regroup and sort of frame ourselves before we meet with them.
Yeah, understood. No, I don't mean the city. I mean us coming together to work out the sort of go over what we said. And
I suggest you alternate with planning. So planning.
The group will come back to.
There are already other groups that alternate with planning.
Yeah, so we'll come back to planning once we have a document that we are going to be advocating around. How's that?
Okay. Let's find it.
I have a question, Adonis, and because you're facilitating, the ideas that we put forward for action, are we going to make a decision on it, or are we just expressing ourselves and then?
I thought we did make a decision around it.
Excellent. So
you want to form a decision
co-chairs? Yeah, with regards to the SDP co-chairs, are folks going to invite the councillor to the planning committee? One of the actions we decided, for example?
You're moving way too fast for us, Wally. We're not there yet. We got your points. We got all the recommendations.
Okay, I'll slow down.
We got all the recommendations. We're getting the advocacy group. So just to put it short, because sure, I guess we do need some kind of motion, but the recommendation is to form an advocacy group with the chairs of the SDP to begin this process of our trying to resolve these issues with the city, just as a short form.
Could you just move that as a recommendation that we could decide on? I don't want anyone to challenge this in the future.
Yes.
Did you put your name forward for the advocacy group?
Sure.
Put me there. Wally, I put you on there. All in favor?
I can't
please show your hands in the reaction if you can.
Oh God.
Reaction here.
Okay. I realize that some of our city representatives might be abstained from voting on this. Gil, do I have your support on this? Ines?
Of course.
Michael, is that
yes?
Okay. Jerome, are you abstaining, Jerome?
Yeah, so typically City of Toronto and TCHC staff, we abstain from all votes. So even earlier with CBOG, we didn't place a vote.
So
I think we made it.
Looks like it's unanimous, but just to check, is there any objections?
Seeing none.
None.
No objections?
Approved.
Okay, folks, with 1 minute over, we did it.
Great job, Adonis.
Great job, Adonis.
Good job, Adonis.
Can we set a date, Adonis?
What's that?
Can we set a date?
We'll send that around. We'll send that around once we meet together with the chairs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody for your cooperation.
Thank you. Have a lovely day. Happy New Year.
Have a good night. Yeah.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please follow our social media platforms. And for more information, please visit our website.